right. So today we have a fun one. Since it is Christmas, we are going to be doing our top 5 favorite Christmas movies. And unlike a podcast that we happened to film just before this, I have checked this list twice, so I hope to not make as many mistakes as I did before. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to you to get us started.
Okay, so to start with, I need to give a big disclaimer. I am admittedly not a Christmas movie person. I don't tend to watch a lot of Christmas movies, around Christmas. I know some people watch them like year round or especially around the Christmas time. I honestly really don't watch a lot of Christmas movies, even around the Christmas time. I just think as a genre, it's one of my least favorite genres because I find it really tropey and I find it very cliche. And I really just don't like that in a lot of movies. And so it was actually kind of challenging to make this list to find just 5 Christmas movies that I really, can say that I genuinely like. A lot of the classics, I'm not trying to say that they're bad movies. I'm not trying to take anyone's enjoyment away from these, but things like Home Alone, one or two, or A Christmas Story, a lot of National Lampoons. I've seen them. I really don't care for them because they fall into that category of just Christmas tropey that I don't really like. Especially as a kid, I found like Kevin McAllister to just be so annoying, even when I was his age, and the kids in A Christmas Story to be so annoying, even when I was their age. Um, so yeah, these are just not movies I naturally gravitate towards. So that being said, for my honorable mentions, I had a handful of movies that I just had to cheat to honestly pad my list a bit, and I picked movies that might not explicitly be, quote unquote Christmas movies, but they are movies at least set around Christmas that I do watch around Christmas time because it's like, they got like the snow motifs and maybe the Christmas time motifs, even if that doesn't really play into the sort of central plot. So yeah, I have one horror movie and 2 superhero movies, but Black Christmas, the original Black Christmas, I definitely view this more as a Christmas movie than as a Halloween time movie. And ever since I watched it for the first time just a couple years ago, I've pretty much watched that pretty reliably every Christmas season. Only the original. I've only seen the original and the 2019 Blumhouse remake, and the
Mm.
2019 Blumhouse remake is atrocious. So if anyone is interested in like this horror movie, which is, same thing with just Christmas movies in general. It's not a subgenre of horror, being a horror fan that I particularly like, but I think that the original Black Christmas from 1974 is pretty solid. Um, it's one of those OG slashers before, predating Halloween, came out the same year as Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But you got a group of sorority sisters staying behind at their sorority house at a college over Christmas break. So the whole campus is kind of shut down for Christmas. And, there's getting some very threatening, sinister phone calls, and there might be a serial killer that's on the loose to get them. So it is, I guess this one is technically a Christmas movie, but I'm putting that as my one of my honorable mentions here. Um, and then for my 2 superhero movies, so these are 2 superhero movies set around Christmas time, not explicitly Christmas movies, like I said, but I do watch these around Christmas time. I got Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This is explicitly set around Christmas time, one that I definitely watch around Christmas time. It's great. Everyone pretty much knows what it is at this point. I'm a huge Into the Spider-Verse. Spider-Man is just one of my favorite characters. He's probably my favorite superhero character, and Into the Spider-Verse is my favorite Spider-Man movie. I gave it a perfect 5 out of 5. I liked it so much better than Across the Spider-Verse, and I still liked Across the Spider-Verse a good bit, but I think that this original, which is set around Christmas time, is the best and the best Spider-Man content that we've seen on the big screen. And then lastly, I will just also shout out Shazam, the first one. The sequel's pretty bad, but the original Shazam set around Christmas time. It's got some of that Christmas motif. It's good, heartwarming tale about family. always gets me very emotional. I think at least in this one, I love what it has to say about, your family. It isn't always blood, and it's the people that love you, and it just has these really good emotional moments. I think Zachary Levi is great. He didn't quite get too annoying yet in this first one, and I think that was definitely a problem that the sequel had. But like I said, this is set around Christmas time, and I do try and watch this around Christmas. So yeah, in order to fill out sort of my repertoire of quote unquote Christmas movies, I'm going with those three as honorable mentions that I watch around Christmas time.
All of those I did not expect at all, but I completely accept your answers. So I was looking forward to this because I wanted to be able to have this discussion. Uh, Most people have probably heard someone say that Die Hard is their favorite Christmas movie. And then you go, well, Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. And then they argue that it is. It seems to be an extremely divisive thing in society. I'm not quite sure why it matters that much. But here's my 2 cents. I've had this discussion with coworkers. I've heard both sides. I've talked about it with family. And I think where I lie is while, yes, when you think of a Christmas movie, like you said, you generally think of the tropes and what is actually being told ar- at Christmas. To me personally, a Christmas movie is a movie that takes place at Christmas. And more importantly, the story doesn't happen if Christmas isn't happening. So, using Die Hard as an example, the whole plot of that movie is set up by it being Christmas, and then there are literal key points throughout the movie that are able to happen because it is Christmas. And so, by that logic, Die Hard's a Christmas movie. Another one would be Gremlins. The story does not happen if it is not Christmas time. And so, to me, that constitutes it being a Christmas movie if Christmas is that central to the story, even if it doesn't have the stereotypical tropes of the Christmas movies we think of. So I'm just laying that out there. That's where I land on it. I am one of those people who says Die Hard's a Christmas movie. My dad, I hadn't even thought about this one. He was like, "Yo, Lethal Weapon's one of my favorite Christmas movies," and then he made his case for why Lethal Weapon's a Christmas movie. And then I finally got to understand what it was like to be on the side when I say Die Hard's a Christmas movie. But he made good points, and so that's kind of where I land with things. So my
I
honorable
think that's
mention.
a very good. I think that's a very good criteria, especially the whole like, will the plot happen if it's not Christmas? I think that's key. I've never heard that before, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And for the record, I think Die Hard is a Christmas movie. It's got my stamp of approval.
There you go. We
If
agree
that's
on
the
it,
case,
and we are
though,
law.
then I guess only Black Christmas on my honorable mentions is technically a Christmas movie, and I'm fine not calling Shazam or Into the Spider-Verse Christmas movies, but those are just they're set at Christmas, just the plot could theoretically take place anytime. I just personally watch them at Christmas, but I guess Black Christmas, the original, would be my official Christmas movie honorable mention.
I also I don't know if you just chose to not watch it or if you want to watch it and you haven't yet. I actually like the 2006 Black Christmas. I know it was made during that time when every horror movie was getting rebooted and people just were hating on that trend, but I actually like the 2006 one. I haven't seen the 2019 one, and I've of course seen the original.
I have not seen the 2006 one, but from what I have heard about it, it's one of those things where the 2019 remake came out and it was absolute garbage. And so it made people like go back and be like, hey, maybe Black Christmas from 2006 isn't that bad.
Yeah, I didn't watch the 2019 one because I heard it was bad. Obviously, maybe I would like it if I watched it, but I didn't care enough to watch it to where, like, normally if critics say something is bad, but I really want to watch it, I'll still watch it anyway. So what the point I'm getting at is I didn't care enough about the 2019 one to push past the critic review, I guess is what I meant to say.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, with that out of the way, my honorable mentions, I'll just kind of speed through these. So Charlie Brown Christmas. I was a Charlie Brown kid. Every holiday we watch the Charlie Brown stuff, so it's just one of those traditions. That's why I have it on here. Then I have A Christmas Story. This one's very interesting because, objectively speaking, this is not a good movie. However, once again, this is a tradition. I watch this with my dad every year on Christmas, like clockwork. They always do the 24-hour run on it's like TBS or USA, and we always make sure to catch one of them. It's one of his favorites from his childhood, and I think that's actually the point of A Christmas Story for a lot of families. It was the tradition when they were young, so then they kept it a tradition. But like I said, objectively speaking, it's not a good movie. Like, we tried to watch the sequel and turned it off 20 minutes in, and it was basically the same stuff as the original. It just didn't have the appeal, and I truly think it's nostalgia that drives A Christmas Story, because I'll just say one more time, objectively speaking, not a good movie, but because of the tradition, I wanted to put it on here. Then my next one I have is Nightmare Before Christmas. This one's probably another one that I feel like a lot of people would have higher, and it's not like I don't like this movie. I just have a couple other ones that I had higher, and I actually really do like this movie. It's one of those classic ones. The As far as the Tim Burton movies go, I would think Nightmare Before Christmas would be one of my personal favorites. But yeah, I even went as Jack Skellington for Halloween one year. I like singing the songs in the movie. I generally just enjoy this movie, but not as much as, like, I know there's a whole fandom behind Nightmare Before Christmas. And that's not personally me, but I do enjoy the movie. And then my true honorable mention at number 6. So the other thing that I guess I should have said early is, um, with the Christmas movies, quote unquote, I've found that with a lot of them that are still deemed to be films, they are 30-minute long, kind of like what would be a show. So most famously, probably think of Frosty the Snowman. Everybody has that as one of their favorite Christmas movies, but it was filmed as a 30-minute show. And so because of that criteria, I was okay considering my honorable mention as another show, and that is Prep and Landing and its sequel, Prep and Landing: Naughty versus Nice. So Prep and Landing came out in 2009 when I was a kid, and this has since become one of the ones that they show every year. Like, if you do the ABC 25 Days of Christmas, stuff like that, like Prep and Landing and its sequel are always put on together. So if you want, you can say it's a full hour. But this is technically called a film because it's a Christmas movie, kind of like how a lot of them are 30 minutes. And this one was like mine. I guess what I mean by that is, people who grew up with like the Rankin and Bass ones when they were really young, that like got cemented as in their childhood. And for me, though, I watched the Rudolph and the Frosties, Prep and Landing was like mine. It came out in 2009. I was a kid. I was still really into Christmas at that time, and I really fell in love with this story. It's about uh, essentially this guy who has put in all of the work known to man. He is the best elf that Santa has. Oh, and I guess I should say, so in this universe, the elves have to go into houses and prep them for Santa's arrival. So they make sure the milk is good, they make sure the cookies are good, they make sure that everybody's asleep, that dogs aren't awake, stuff like that. And so the best elf that could possibly exist is our main character. And then he doesn't get the promotion, his partner does. And so the story is he's an absolute Grinch because he worked his butt off and should have gotten the big promotion and didn't. And his new partner is a rookie. So it's kind of like the grizzled vet and the young guy story, but it's a comedy, and the rookie has no idea what he's doing and keeps failing the prep, but the old guy won't fix anything because he's disgruntled about not getting the promotion. So everything goes wrong. And it's just really fun. There's a lot of cool life lessons. I've said on a couple podcasts that I really enjoy animated stuff, especially because I feel like there's a lot of adult lessons that can be put in kids programming and shown well. And so yeah, and then the sequel, it kind of same deal where he has to be partnered with his brother, who he's always hated because it's kind of the classic dynamic where it's like one brother was always viewed as being better than the other brother. He's like the cooler brother and the main character's not. So the themes change slightly, but the themes change differently, but then the story plays out relatively the same, and the takeaway can also kind of be the same. And so yeah, these ones are ones that I watch every year. They were like cemented in my childhood, and I really enjoy the Prep and Landing stuff. So that's my honorable mention.
Yeah, I've never heard of Prep and Landing. I was Googling it as you were speaking to sort of get more of like a context. I really feel like this is something I should have seen or at least like should have heard of, but honestly drew like a complete blank. So I
It's
can't
because it's
really
mine.
say anything. Right, exactly. Yeah. I guess my, aversion to most Christmas movies kind of just extended back to when we were 10. And so I just did not have this on my radar at all. Um, but yeah, I mean, as you mentioned with some of your other ones, I mentioned on A Christmas Story, not a huge fan of that. Not a fan. I know you didn't like properly mention them, but not a huge fan of those 30-minute clips. I don't even think I've seen the Charlie Brown Christmas except maybe when I was like a little kid. And then a lot of those classics like Rudolph and Frosty. I mean, maybe once again when I was a kid, but haven't watched them in, easily over a decade. So, um yeah, no, this one definitely did sound interesting though. It sounds like if I did like Christmas content as a kid, it would be something like this.
Yeah, I
Just
know
great
you're not the
clamping.
biggest animated person. Otherwise, I would probably recommend it pretty highly. It's it's nice because, like I said, they're both filmed as shows, even though they're technically films, and so you're done in like 20 minutes because of commercial breaks. So you can they manage to tell the story so quickly that you kind of get in, you have your laughs, you learn your lesson, and it's very palatable if it's one you wanted to try.
Sense. I will say the 1 hour long Family Guy Christmas special Road to the North Pole might be my favorite piece of Christmas content. Number one on the list.
And it's funny that you say that because, um, actually, I'm gonna let you go ahead and go with your number five while I pull up the exact title of what I'm thinking of, and then I'll bring us back to Family Guy.
Okay, sounds good. So my number five is a Christmas movie that I did love as a kid. One of the rare sort of cases. I really enjoy the whole trilogy, but I'm mostly going to speak on the first one, and that is The Santa Claus from 1994 with Tim Allen. Um, it's a movie I feel like most people are familiar with. There was a revival on Disney Plus last year that didn't do so hot, but at least I think it put back out there, into the ether that this movie is still like a really good movie. But it's like a Christmas comedy film. If you grew up at all in the 90s or early 2000s, you probably saw it on Disney Channel, which is where I first watched it. I watched it frequently as a kid, where you have Tim Allen as this sort of regular dad whose family's falling apart. And he's trying to, rekindle this relationship with his son. And basically, it's kind of morbid when you watch it in the present and you're like, man, this is a kid's movie that I loved when I was a kid. He doesn't murder Santa Claus. He like what he ends up doing ends up killing Santa Claus incidentally, so like third degree murder at best. And he basically has to become Santa Claus as Christmas is coming up because there is no Santa Claus to, there's all the elves still out there and there's the reindeer and someone needs to do it. And it's sort of like a punishment that since he's the one that led to the death of Santa Claus, he needs to become the new Santa Claus. And so, of course, in the process, he rekindles that relationship with his son and his family that's been going on. So, yeah, this is just one that's a lot of nostalgia. I haven't watched it in a little while, but at least more recently than when I was a little kid. But I watched this a lot all the time. Like I said, it was like a Disney Channel staple growing up. I remember it just being very funny and having, um, you know, a higher because it wasn't made as a Disney Channel original, so it always had like a higher quality than a lot of other Disney Channel original content. And just appreciated a lot of the notes and what it had to say about like family and Christmas time and things like that. But I don't remember two very well, but I do remember three very well. It's when Martin Short came in to play Jack Frost, and that's one that most people say is like garbage, but I actually think that's the one I remember the most as a kid, just because I just remember it being more like colorful and flashy and have crazier characters and stuff like that. But I'm putting sort of like I'm softly putting the whole trilogy, but I'm just focusing more specifically on this first one because I feel like if I went and rewatched, that one would be the best. But that's my number five, The Santa Claus.
Yeah, so this one's interesting. I think I remember you saying this was one of the few Christmas movies you liked. Um, I never really liked this one as a kid. I've seen the first one and I didn't watch any of the sequels. It's not a Tim Allen thing. I actually really like Tim Allen, but I just never really got into these movies. And I think It's interesting, and you'll probably see this with my top five. Besides the classics that I watched with my parents, I too am not a big Christmas person, or at least Christmas movie person. And so I never went out of my way to watch the Christmas movies that my parents didn't like, unless, as you'll see with my list, they fall along the lines of other types of stuff that I like. And that's your teaser for my list.
Yeah, no, I do wanna rewatch these at some point because I do have such strong memories watching them as a child. Um, so yeah, I'm just curious how they hold up.
Yeah, I guess that. Oh wow, Santa Claus 2006. Why'd I think it was later? Okay, interesting. Yeah, this is totally because of the age I was when I tried to watch the first one, but that's not necessarily a knock on the movie. Um, so real quick because I found it. So it's funny that you mentioned the Family Guy Christmas special because I have come to the conclusion. I don't think I told you this. My favorite Family Guy episode of all time is season 16, episode 9, Don't Be a Dickens at Christmas from 2017. And it's technically a Christmas thing, but it's a show. I'm not like adding it to the list. But I rewatch this now every year at Christmas. It's my personal favorite Family Guy episode. I really like it. I think all the jokes are on point, and it's ironic that it happens to also be at Christmas. But this is the one where Peter gets visited by Patrick Swayze's ghost, and they like do a Christmas Carol, and it's just to me, it's hilarious.
It's been a long time since I've seen that episode, since, like, around when it premiered. So, I try and rewatch, like, a bunch of Christmas themed episodes of, like, Family Guy, American Dad, things like that around the holidays, so I'll try and add that one to this year's list.
There you go. And that then you will truly get to experience the. I know we've kind of talked about how Family Guy's gone downhill, but I think this was before that started. So Um, my number five was heavily hinted at earlier, and I have put Die Hard here. Yes, shocker, it's not higher. But uh, when it comes to Christmas stuff, I have a couple movies that I have to watch every year at Christmas. That's just my thing, and so I put those higher. Whereas Die Hard, it's just kind of fun to watch whenever, and just kind of doubling down on what I said earlier. To me, a Christmas movie is something where the plot of the story cannot actually happen if it does not take place at Christmas. And also, there are tons of instances in Die Hard where the Christmas aesthetic is why those events are able to happen. And yeah, this is just a great movie. You know, I'm not even trying to. I think in a previous podcast, I defended why it was a good movie as far as, John McClane's an awesome hero, what it did to revolutionize the action genre. Alan Rickman is a perfect villain in Hans Gruber. I still am in awe every time I see that was the first movie he ever did. That's just awesome. But also, the Christmas stuff itself is really cool. The I have a gun now, ho ho ho, is one of the most popular shirts you can buy. Oh, sorry, sweatshirts. Like if you ever want that. The stuff that they do with the Christmas tree, with the glass, with the wrapping tape and all the excuse me, the like the wrapping supplies, like little bits and pieces of. When I was making this list, I truly realized how much of like the famous scenes have like the Christmas influence. So there you go. It's also a really good Christmas movie because Christmas kind of helps him save the day. So yeah, I don't want to go too in depth because I ranted about Die Hard for like 20 minutes in a previous podcast we did, but it's a very good movie. I highly recommend it to everybody.
No, sort of like you said, no new thoughts that weren't already discussed in earlier podcasts, but just to sort of reassert some things that I had said before, just real quick. I've only seen this movie once. It was when we watched it together. And so this was several years ago. That was my only time watching it. I liked it. I just never bothered to rewatch it or to watch any of the sequels yet. But from considering all of the information that I have gathered about it, I am like I had said earlier, I firmly give it my stamp of approval for being a Christmas movie for sure. So I very much respect people's opinions when they say that it is. I'm also just a bit of a contrarian, so that kind of helps.
uh, two things before you move on. One, my dad told me this year that he would like Die Hard to be cemented as a Christmas movie we watch every year. So I guess now it will become a tradition. And two, for those people who care, it has a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. So if you're like a critics person, the critics love it.
Makes sense. Doesn't the second one also take place around Christmas time?
Yeah, so the second one takes place around Christmas, but the main story more has to do with that it's snowing because their planes essentially get uh uh their planes can it's instead of Nakatomi Plaza, it's a gigantic airport and no one can leave because it's snowing, so all the planes have been there's a word for when they're landed and can't leave and I'm drawing a blank on it, but that's the so it's more the snow being a main part of the theme as opposed to it being Christmas. So I the Die Hard 2 one's definitely more of a gray area, but yes, you are correct that it is around Christmas as well.
I think you mean grounded. Is that the word you're looking
Grounded,
for?
thank you. I could not
Okay.
think of that word.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I definitely, at the very least, would want to rewatch the original Die Hard soon, but um, yeah, I respect that opinion as a Christmas movie. Okay, so my number four is a very new entry that I feel like is going to stick around as a Christmas staple moving forward. Just saw this barely a month ago, but it already just elevated up into this number four slot. It would probably even get higher on this list as the years go by and I get to watch it more. But my number four, I'm going with The Holdovers, which is a very recent movie that came out earlier this year in November. It is an Alexander Payne film starring Paul Giamatti. It was a very common movie trailer movie like in the theater, so I feel like most people saw it. It's getting a lot of Oscar buzz. It got a lot of smaller awards buzz so far, including it's been nominated 3 times for the Golden Globes. So it definitely made some waves, but it very much feels like an independent film. It is set back in the 70s and it's actually filmed like the way they film it. It looks like a 70s movie with like the film grain and the aspect ratio and everything. So it feels very much like a very immersive throwback, but basically you got this prestigious New England boarding school. And every year, since it's a boarding school, there's a handful of students who, through whatever family situation or whatnot, they can't go home. Excuse me. They can't go home for Christmas break, and they get like 2 weeks off around Christmas or something like that. And so they call those students the holdovers that basically just have to stick around without their family for those 2 weeks until the next semester starts. And Paul Giamatti plays this history teacher at this school who is, very much like a Scrooge and a Grinch. And, he's very lonely and all the students hate him. And he's kind of grumpy, this grumpy old man. And he draws the short straw and has to be like the chaperone of the holdovers and stick behind himself and take care of them. And it follows him and this one main kid. And this one main kid, played by Dominic Sessa, which this is like his first like film, and he is incredible. And he's not like a kid actor by any means, but he's at least like early 20s, maybe around 20. And so just a really incredible performance for Jess making his debut. But he plays this kid who didn't expect to be one of the holdovers, but gets a call from his rich parents, and it's like, oh, sorry, we took a cruise to the Caribbean or whatnot, so we have to leave you behind. And him and Paul Giamatti hate each other because that's his teacher, and they have this really strained relationship. And so they sort of, throughout the course of this movie and throughout the course of their time over the Christmas season, where they're kind of stuck together, they basically form this sort of relationship where they start to open up to each other and just sort of realize that they're more similar than they thought and realize that the other has problems too, and they can understand where the other is coming from and why they act the way they do. And it's all set in the frame of like the Christmas season and that spirit of giving and charity and family. And neither of these people have a really good family life, and they sort of find family with each other and with a third party, played by this woman, Joy Randolph, who is incredible. And they form this like this three like unlikely family over Christmas, and it's just such like a real good feel good movie. Very emotional. It definitely evoked a lot of emotion out of me, and just sort of puts you right in that holiday spirit of like family and friendship and giving and love and things like that. And so yeah, I definitely plan on rewatching this pretty much every Christmas time moving forward, where I feel like it will only go up on this list, but this automatically shot up to my number 4.
All right, very cool. I have seen the trailer for this, and I have heard all of the buzz surrounding it, but I have not seen the movie, so I cannot necessarily speak to it. But the plot sounds really good, so I'm sure I'll check it out once once it hits a streaming service.
I think, of course, I'm pulling for Cillian Murphy as Oppenheimer for Best Actor at the Oscars, but I think Paul Giamatti, at the very least, deserves a nomination. He was just that good.
Ah, I like it. I always like when Giamatti gets some love. I like him as an actor.
Yeah, and he's a
Um,
surprisingly good serious actor too. Like most people
yeah,
know him for like comedies and being goofy, but there's been quite a few movies, this one included, where he is a really good, just dramatic actor.
yeah. Isn't he the main character on Billions?
He is, and I have not personally seen that show, but I've heard nothing but good things about him and that show.
Okay, that's the. I'm currently watching him in 30 Coins, and he's great. So that's good old Paul. Um, he's also isn't he the Rhino in the Amazing Spider-Man too?
Very famous, serious, dramatic role, the Rhino in The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
And isn't his only words "I am the Rhino" or whatever?
That is one of very few of his lines. That is correct.
um, okay. It is interesting that you mentioned this because I guess I should say, because I think I said it on a previous podcast. I ended up not getting to the theater to see Silent Night before us recording this podcast. So anybody who thought that Silent Night might appear on this list, at least for me, that will not be the case. But I'm eventually going to see it, and maybe it will become one of my favorite Christmas movies. Um, but my number 4 is a recent movie. It's actually the most recent by a large margin because most of what I have on here is pretty old. And it is from 2022 and it is Violent Night. I currently have it at 4 because I have not rewatched it yet. I'm going to. It's going to be one of my Christmas movies now, and I'm curious if it'll still hold up on rewatch. So, didn't want to put it too high, but essentially in this movie, you have a rich family who is all gathered together for Christmas, and there's a ragtag group of mercenaries who are trying to steal their fortune, led by John Leguizamo, who isn't necessarily a villain that like rewrites how villains should be made moving forward, or like it's not one of those things. But I think he's pretty good. And then David Harbour plays, I would say, disgruntled's not the right word. He's just a Santa who's been beat up by the modern day child for Christmas. And so let's just say he's lost his Christmas spirit. And then through just complete circumstance of ending up at this house during the robbery and the magic of the one child who still believes, he ends up beating the crap out of all of the mercenaries. And yes, this is a complete action movie with comedy. There's a lot of funny parts. At least I laughed at a lot of stuff. Was it everything I expected it to be? No. But did I have a lot of fun? Definitely. And I feel like this could be one where, while I think I gave it like a 3.5 out of 5 when I saw it in theaters, I think on rewatch I could like it even more. But yeah, this was just really fun last year, and I'm hoping it'll be just as fun this year. And you're about to see a run of trends where I pick a lot of movies where Santa's not being normal Santa.
Yeah, no, I did get to check this out last year. I liked it a good bit. I think that David Harbour I think he's just a great actor who's sort of going through his renaissance right now. I know Stranger Things isn't over, but outside of Stranger Things, I think he's really been hitting a stride with some bangers, and this was one of them. He was great in this role as this sort of Santa, like you described. sort of he was just like kind of perfect for that kind of role. And like you said, it's got some good comedy bits, it's got some really good action bits. And it really leaned into the Christmas tropes from like a comedy angle, which I could appreciate because, there was just some very, corny Christmas themed kills and Christmas one-liners, and I felt like it was really just kind of leaning into the silliness of the tropes. And so that definitely helped with my enjoyment. But this was a very solid pick because this was one of my it wasn't in my top of last year, but it was in like the upper middle. So this was definitely one that I enjoyed quite a bit. And I believe there's sequels coming.
Yeah, I know they announced Violet Night 2. I'm not sure if they announced a full trilogy. Um, I know that I know there's a Violent Night 2 coming. I'm not sure if they announced a full trilogy, but yeah, it was definitely, I think it's worthy of one, even if it is just more fun and this becomes like I don't know, one of those like a Taken trilogy where the first one was really popular and then the next two, they're fun to the people who have seen them, but it's not like it's an action trilogy that's heralded above all others, but it's fun to go back and revisit. And like I always say, there's a difference between a good movie and a fun movie, and to some this was definitely a good movie, but I think most of all it was a fun movie.
I could agree with that for sure. Um, okay, so my number three um, is historically my favorite Christmas movie, like as a kid place, but obviously being, third on a list where I'm not particularly, passionate about Christmas movies. This is still one that I very much enjoy. And yeah, it would definitely was my favorite as a kid, but I'm going with Elf from 2003. From director Jon Favreau and starring Will Ferrell. I think I've mentioned before on this podcast, I am a huge Will Ferrell fan. And this was my real introduction to Will Ferrell and his sort of style of comedy. And B, this was really one of his first like actual starring roles in a feature film. I think Old School came out around this same time, but if I'm not mistaken, Elf was really like his first big breakthrough from like Saturday Night Live and like TV and stuff like that, and sort of where his renaissance began, or at least in my opinion, his renaissance. But yeah, Elf is just one of those movies that's just the most just Christmas on blast, like in your face Christmas. And it just works for me. And I think part of that is just enjoying Will Ferrell so much and just all the nostalgia of having watched this so many times as a kid. It's just so quotable. Everyone knows so much about it. Buddy the Elf, what's your favorite color? Hi, buddy. Bye, buddy. I hope you find your dad. There's just so many quotable lines that you'll find on merch everywhere and people recognize so many iconic scenes. It just really leans hard into the Christmas motif. But I think in this case, it works just because it's coming at it from that and it's also got some decent emotional moments. The whole point being, he's a displaced human who was left accidentally taken up to the North Pole, raised by elves, trying to find his real dad. And so there's like some surprisingly, very deep emotional moments in it, especially rewatching it recently. I just rewatched it a couple weeks ago, and I would say it definitely still holds up. It's just so funny. Will Ferrell just, his whole shtick is like being a man child, and I feel like just it works in this movie unlike any other. And so, yeah, he's just got this infectious, energy and enthusiasm for Christmas. And yeah, it just, just the two movies above it, I just think recently I've like started liking a little bit more. But but yeah, as of right now, it's still at my number three. I'd say my top three at least are a very solid go-to Christmas picks for every year. But for my number three, I'm going with Elf.
Yeah, this is definitely a solid pick as far as Christmas goes. This is one where I know everybody loves this movie. I do not. And I think it's mainly because, as you know, I'm just not a Will Ferrell person. I think it's one of those things where you have to like Will Ferrell, kind of like I know you mentioned National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation earlier, and I'm not, also not a Chevy Chase person. That's like my dad loves showing me classic stuff, and the one set of movies that I haven't been able to actually get into are the ones starring Chevy Chase, and so kind of the same with Will Ferrell. So it's not necessarily that I think that, oh man, we have completely different opinions here. I'm standing my ground that Elf sucks. I think it's just that I don't like Will Ferrell, and so this movie just never appealed to me like it did to so many other people.
Makes sense. Like I said, I feel like for me, what I do like about it is Will Ferrell being Will Ferrell. So I could totally see how if you weren't already on board with Will Ferrell, just like as a comedic actor, this would not be your thing.
Yeah. Um, but no, definitely. I actually going into this, I thought that was going to be your number one. So now I'm curious to see what you have at one and two. Um, so moving on to my top three. So I mentioned that there are movies that I watch every year at Christmas time, and these top three are the ones that we are getting to now. So the first one is the 2012 reboot of Silent Night. Now, this is the reboot of an 80s slasher that was borderline direct to DVD, and it was just one of those ones made during the height of Halloween and Friday the 13th and Nightmare. And essentially, it's this guy who has a traumatic experience from his childhood regarding Christmas. And so when he gets older, he ends up finally having his mental break. He dresses up as Santa Claus and he goes around killing people. This movie is the same name and was supposed to be inspired by that franchise because I know it at least went to 4 movies. I think it might have gone to 6. Um, but this tells a different story. So essentially, once again, it is a murderous Santa. However, it's more of a murder mystery, whereas in the original, you follow the person as they slowly have their mental break. In this one, you follow a cop played by Jamie King, who is essentially going around seeing all of these murders after they've already taken place and trying to figure out who is the Santa who's murdering everybody. And it almost has like a Scream feel, where it's just like a really cool who done it, who's behind the mask. And then the thing that I like the most about it is the level of realism with their kills. And what I mean by that is it's not like Saw level torture porn, but they do not hold back with the R rating. So as an example, and this is a spoiler warning, there is a mom who it appears to be a single mother. She's doing her best to make to help out her daughter, and her daughter's just being a little brat. And they set up this whole scene for like 5 minutes where she's just being like the worst kid you could ever think of. The doorbell rings, and when she opens the door, an axe comes flying in and chops her head in half. And it's just one of those things that it's like, oh, okay, cool. I'm totally okay with that. She deserved it. Of course, in the metaphysical sense, because you're watching a movie. But it's a lot. Most of the kills are like that, where they let you meet the characters and then you get to see why they should die. Or in some instances, maybe they're a cool person. You're like, oh no, they don't deserve it. I'm rooting for you. And then those are normally longer chase sequences. The guy who did this, Stephen C. Miller, he just, really kind of, at least in my opinion, knew how to set up a lot of the kills. He went full out with his mind, as the kids would say. He let the intrusive thoughts win. And to me, this isn't necessarily a good movie, but this is the complete definition of it's a fun movie. Even rewatching it, knowing who the killer is, I still like it. It's also got Malcolm McDowell, who's great. It's got Donald Logue, who's also great. But yeah, it's really gritty. It almost feels like End of Watch, if you've seen that movie, where the style of the way he filmed it adds to like that gritty realism of something that is very clearly not real, of course. But yeah, it just there's something to me that's very interesting. I think we've talked about where I tend to like movies where things that are traditionally seen as like good and holy are not. So Santa, arguably one of the happiest, purest, holiest images that we have in society. It's interesting to me to see that be turned on its head, and so I really like the idea of the killer Santa, and that he's not bringing presents to your door, or at least good presents. So yeah, this is one of those ones that I didn't actually watch it when it first came out. I ended up going back to watch it like 5-ish years later, and then just instantly fell in love and have watched it every year since.
Yeah, I have not seen either this one or the original. I know Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 is like notoriously like one of the worst horror movies ever made.
Yeah, because of it's garbage day.
Yeah, apparently like half the movie is literally just the first movie too.
It is. It at 100%.
Like
The first 40 minutes is his mental breakdown from the last 40 minutes of the first movie.
right, and it's like half the runtime is just straight up recycled footage. And yeah, I've heard a lot about it, but I've heard the first one is like one of those cult classics where, like you said, it's like borderline direct to DVD, but like recently it's started like picking up like a cult fandom. But I actually didn't even know there was a remake, to be completely honest. I knew there was like a bunch of sequels, but I just know two is like because of stuff like that Garbage Day line. It's just one of those notorious movies. So like I alluded with Black Christmas, I'm not the biggest fan of like the Christmas horror subgenre, but I'm always interested to expand my horror horizons. So who knows, maybe I'll just go through like a Christmas horror phase and at least check out the original and this remake. So there you go.
It is interesting because kind of like you said with Black Christmas, this was one of those movies that was completely made in this time period of the late 2000s, early 2010s, where they were just taking every uh 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 slash they could get their hands on and just remaking it or rebooting it, depending. And so I totally could see how this would fall under the radar. It definitely did for me, but I was happy when I watched it. And so the sequels to Silent Night, Deadly Night are also known to be pretty bad, but they are also well known because have you ever heard of a person named Brian Usna?
I have not.
So him and his crew are famous for how should I put it? Uh, they are like Cronenberg esque, but like on acid. Where so like the Night, Deadly Night sequels, the Reanimator sequels, they've done those movies. The Dentists, if you've ever seen them. One of my personal favorites, Society, where. I want if I remember correctly, I'm drawing a blank on his name. His lead effects artist, but he was like a big Cronenberg fan and wanted to just go above and beyond. And so every movie that Yuzna does, he has his buddy helping him out. He has a fun name like Phantom Jack or something. It's like not a real name. And he always has the weirdest and creepiest creatures created in his movies. The when it comes to special effects, I would this guy is like insane and I love his passion, but it's not for the faint of heart. I think I've recommended Society to you before. That movie is absolutely an acid trip. But yeah, so that's the other reason why the Silent Night Deadly Night, like the couple of back end sequels, just because they had Yuzna and his team involved and they're like known for being just absolutely bonkers.
Okay, there you go. Interesting lore behind the movie, I guess. I actually just looked it up. Black Christmas is the original is the same director as A Christmas Story.
Ah, that's
Bob
cool.
Bob Clark directed both, so that's interesting. I just didn't know that. Also directed Porky's. So,
Oh, okay, well that makes sense. That one is every dad's favorite 80s movie.
yes.
But
So take of that what you will.
have you seen Porky's?
I have not. I've just heard it's like American Pie from the 80s.
Yeah, it is. Of every movie that has ever existed, I feel completely okay saying this. It is the complete definition of a movie that was absolutely hilarious in the 80s, but could never, ever, ever be touched in today's age.
Sense. That makes sense. Everything I've heard about it makes sense. That makes sense. Um, okay. So my number two is a movie that's just slowly grown on me the more I've watched it, and it's really solidified as, clearly one of my favorite Christmas movies of all time, and one that I do watch every Christmas since first seeing it. Relatively recent film, but my number two is The Grinch. Not the original cartoon from the 60s, Not How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the Jim Carrey version, which really creeps me out and has since I was a kid, but the Illumination The Grinch from 2018, where Benedict Cumberbatch voices the Grinch. So it's surprising because I'm not a big animation fan, as you've mentioned. And I'm not a big Illumination fan. I've really only seen like two or three Illumination films. This just happens to be one of them. And and I'm not, a particular Dr. Seuss fan or like fan of the original source material, but this film I feel like just captures what that original story is supposed to be about so well. Benedict Cumberbatch plays this version of the Grinch that's just so he's like likable, whereas other versions of the Grinch, like the original cartoon and the Jim Carrey version, I feel like they made him like too off-putting. At least to start with this one, they kind of nailed this balance of him being this very grumpy, anti-Christmas person, but he's like still got this charm and charisma where like, you know, I'm not just gonna keep crapping on the Jim Carrey version. I just really don't like that movie, and I'm gonna use it as a comparison. I'm gonna use it just like for comparison's sake. In that movie, I just don't like the Grinch at all, which I guess is like part of the point, but I feel like they go so overboard. It's like to the point where it's like I don't want to watch him do anything because I just really don't like him. And so in this version, it's like, yes, he's, anti-Christmas. Yes, he's very grumpy, but it's like it still makes him likable because he's still got that sort of like villainous charisma that, to make an Illumination comparison, sort of like a Gru in the first Despicable Me, where he's like the bad guy to start, but he still has that sort of appeal. And then, of course, he learns about Christmas and the family, and it actually like talks about like why he hates Christmas, and it's like really, really sad. And this movie like genuinely pulls on heartstrings, but then it just has such like a heartfelt ending. And I just feel like it just captures what that original source material is supposed to be so well. But it's just so emotional. It's actually got really good music. It sounds so like 2010s, but like Pharrell does like a remix of the classic Grinch songs, and it's actually like really good, surprisingly. And he does like all the narration, and he does like a hip hop rap remix of the Grinch song, which sounds awful, but unless it's actually really good and actually really works. And yeah, like I just like I said, Benedict Cumberbatch does a great job. I like this version of the character. There's a great voice cast. There's like Keenan Thompson, Rashida Jones, Angela Lansbury, and so on and so forth. And yeah, I don't know. This movie kind of took me by surprise when I first saw it, and I thought it was just going to be like a cutesy kid film, and then and it just became this very heartfelt interpretation of the Grinch character that I've learned to really love, and I watch it every Christmas. So yeah, The Grinch from 2018 is my number two.
Yeah, this one's a solid pick. I think, kind of to your point, everybody was just so quick to crap on this movie because I feel like most people really love that original Grinch. Similar to the Santa Claus, this was just not one that I ever really grew to like, much to the dismay of the world. And so I did like the Benedict Cumberbatch one. I know you said you don't really watch the classics. I of course really like the classic Grinch with Boris Karloff. And so, that one's probably the one that I would pick if I was to watch one, but that's not to say anything about this movie. I like you just to repeat from earlier, I did really like this movie. I think it got some undeserved hate, and I think that was mostly due to they were like, "Oh, Jim Carrey already did it. Why are you making another one?" So I don't think that's necessarily a knock on the movie itself.
No, I completely agree. And I just looked it up when I was trying to just pull up some last minute information. And apparently, this is the highest grossing Christmas film of all time. It
The
made five,
Benedict Cumberbatch.
yes, the Illumination one. It made 526.7 million, and it is the highest grossing movie that's considered like a Christmas movie.
Interesting.
And it's
I
also the
mean,
highest grossing Dr. Seuss adaptation. So it's got both
there
of
you
those.
go. Clearly, some people liked the movie.
Yes, exactly.
um, Okay. So, to move on to my number two, I'm going to need you to prepare yourself because this is probably going to be the wackiest movie I've had on a list yet in a podcast. But you just got to stick with me. All right. My number two is 2005's Santa's Sleigh. Another horror movie. This one is a horror comedy, though. And you know how we talked about that we really enjoy Maleficent, and one of the key things about it is that James Wan wanted to set out to make like the worst horror movie he could, and then somehow ended up making a masterpiece? So, with Santa's Sleigh, the creators had kind of the same idea in mind. They wanted to make the worst movie they possibly could. And in attempting to do that, in my opinion, they ended up making a movie that's so bad it's good. I just recently rewatched this about 2 weeks ago. This was the one I used to usher in the Christmas month. And the way that this works is Goldberg, the famous WWE wrestler, was cast to play Santa. And Santa is actually Satan. Ha ha ha, a little bit of wordplay there. And he made a deal 1,000 years ago that he would give gifts to people instead of murder people, and blah 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 with the lore. But now it's 1,000 years later, and the curse has been broken. So on the day of Christmas, for 24 hours, he has come to this little town, and he's murdering everybody. Like when I I don't think anybody in the town survives by the time his rampage is done. Um, it's a complete like direct to DVD. They just wanted to have fun, so the amount of people that they kill, like generally speaking, with the low budget horror movies, they don't normally go really in depth on giving everybody their own special kill, but for this movie they really do, which I appreciate, and it's all used with real special effects. But specifically, if you never want to watch this movie, if I don't sell you on it, you have to at least watch the opening scene. The opening scene, they paid Fran Drescher, Chris Kattan, Rebecca Gayheart, James Caan, a bunch of these famous people to be chilling at Christmas dinner, and then the movie starts with Santa coming down the chimney and murdering all of them in this epic opening for a movie. And what's even funnier is there's a complete score that was made by a band that doesn't exist, by people who don't know how to play music, and all of the lyrics are just somebody saying like the same word over and over again. So even the music is meant to be a joke. The story is absolutely terrible. They like try to make the craziest lore possible to where you're like, what the heck? The main characters are a romance that makes zero sense. Like the reactions the main character has are not literal reactions that a real human being would have. And everything is just so crazy. They even have, so there's the one Jewish character who of course is celebrating Christmas, and so Goldberg literally takes a giant menorah and murders him with it. And it's just that's the movie. It's they're trying to figure out how to stop Santa, and every other scene is somebody else in the town dying, and it is just so much fun. I love watching this movie. It's only an hour and 18 minutes. So you kind of blink and it's over. Um, and yeah, it's just like I apologize that I say this with like every time I try and pitch a bad movie, but there's a difference between good movies and bad movies. I'm sorry, with good movies and fun movies. This is 100% not a good movie. It is just so much fun, and at least for me, I'm laughing the entire time, and that's what makes it awesome. I also love, like I said, the idea of Santa just being, well, since he's Goldberg, that's kind of how he does all of the kills, because he can do the stunts and stuff, so that like adds the extra layer to it. But yeah, it's just this is such a funny movie.
I have never heard of this movie before in my life, and I just Googled it. I have continued not to have any memory of this movie whatsoever. So, where did you even find this?
Um, I want to say that, so I know I randomly saw this like a decade ago, Um, I forget if it was like something that was on Netflix and it just kind of happened to be shown, or if it's something that well, no, because I wasn't doing DVDs at that time. So yeah, I think it would have had to have been like randomly on Netflix or one of the like the direct TV movies back when we had that. I just randomly found it one day and then I fell in love with it immediately. Um, the I'm trying to find the name of the town is called like Hell's Landing or something. um the guy's name, the main character is Nick Yulson. Like it's just oh, and sorry, it's not Satan, it's Shaitan. Like it's
Okay.
just random stuff like that. It's so hilarious.
All right. Well, I'm not the biggest fan uh of horror comedies, but if I really scrape the bottom of the barrel for my horror Christmas potential watch through, then maybe this could make the list.
I'm telling
So
you, even if you never watch the movie, you just have to watch the opening sequence. It's like 5 minutes of your life that I promise you won't regret spending.
sounds good. I will have to check that out. Okay, so my number one is a movie like you with Die Hard. I believe it was even the same list, a movie that I talked about before, so I won't talk about it too much. But it is my number one Christmas movie of all time, and that is It's a Wonderful Life from 1946. So Frank Capra movie starring Jimmy Stewart, sort of in this peak in 1946, and just a iconic movie to say the least, and just a family movie that my family loves to watch together. But just the movie's about family and the importance in the holidays and people mattering and what their lives mean, and sort of just takes on a lot of these existential questions that arise in the holidays. But yeah, I mean, most people are familiar with it. If they haven't seen it, then they've probably seen it parodied. I mean, like even the Muppets have done like a parody of this, where this man, this hardworking businessman loses a bunch of money, feels like a failure for his family, and basically wishes he was never born. And this angel gives him the opportunity to see what life was like if he never existed. And he finds out that people are for the worse and the world is for the worse without him in it. So sort of learns this, and it's set around right on Christmas. So really just good messaging, and definitely gets me in the holiday spirit. It's just such a classic. It's so engaging. It's a pretty wide scope movie where like that is, I guess, the main plot, but that's really only a part of it. For the most part, it really is just about this man's life from when he was a little kid through to where he is now, and then exploring this alternate reality. But very much it's the story of this main character named George. And yeah, it's just a very heartfelt movie. Definitely puts me in the Christmas spirit. It's got a lot of that Christmas motif and a lot of like what the holidays are about. So I've talked about it before, so I'm not going to belabor it, but easily probably my number one favorite Christmas movie of all time. It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, definitely. This is one I debated putting it on an honorable mention, but I just didn't want my list to be crazy long with like all the classics I like. But yeah, this one's really solid. Of those like super classic movies, this one's one of my favorite. Just generally speaking, movies from that time period, not necessarily Christmas movies, but as far as Christmas movies go, it's very solid. Um, so yeah,
Yes.
same as you. I won't necessarily repeat a lot of the stuff because I think we actually had a pretty in-depth conversation in our. I think this was from favorite classics of all time.
Yeah, this was like one, yeah, in my top five favorite classics in general of all time. But yeah,
Okay.
it's my number one Christmas. So
Well, I like it. Very solid pick. For mine, the fun train of me being weird is over. This one's a very standard Christmas movie. It is a complete classic. It is Santa Claus is Coming to Town from 1970. So we talked about the Rankin Bass movies earlier. You've got your Rudolph, you've got your Year Without a Santa Claus, all the different ones from there. And my favorite was always Santa Claus is Coming to Town. There are tons of people who do different types of traditions as far as how Santa works, but to me, the lore the only thing that's canon is what is put forth in this movie. This is where I believed that everything came from. And so to me, this was like the standard for Christmas. It felt only right to make this be my number one. Of all of those classic ones, even though I'm no longer like as into the Christmas stuff as I used to be, this is the one I still rewatch. I do enjoy it that much. I love singing all the songs. And it's just generally speaking a good story. Uh, uh, if but, have you seen it?
I have seen it when I was little, but it has been at least, like I said before with like Frosty, Rudolph, I've definitely seen them. I like have vague memories of them when I was little, but it's been at least 10, 15 years maybe.
Okay, so I'll just give a quick rundown. So Fred Astaire, famous singer, he plays this postman who is essentially the narrator of this story, and he gets all of these postcards from children asking questions about why Santa has gray hair, why only goes through chimneys, like all of the different things that are like specific to Santa. And so he tells the story of how Saint Nick came to be and explains all of them. And one of my favorite things when I was younger, my parents used to give me gifts from Burgermeister Meisterburger, who's the bad guy in this film, and I was too young to not realize that Burgermeister Meisterburger totally wasn't coming down the chimney. But I thought it was like, oh, Santa and him become friends, so that's his buddy, so I get stuff from him. Cool. He's a great character, but that's the general gist. There's Burgermeister Meisterburger bans toys from this town, and so Santa ends up learning all of his tricks in order to evade the Burgermeister and still give the children Christmas is kind of the basis of the story. And so that in and of itself is also cool, where it's like, I don't know. It's one of those things. It's like, oh, he's a rebel. He's fighting he's going against the man, or however deep you really want to get it. If you want to make it more than just a kids show. But yeah, it's Mickey Rooney is also one of the voice actors. He's a famous person, but this one was always just my favorite. I do enjoy the claymation. This is technically an animated movie. I always give huge amounts of respect to people who do claymation because it is really hard and it takes a lot of effort and you have to love what you're doing, and these people do. So yeah, that's my number one. My number one is Santa Claus is Coming to Town. In my opinion, the best Rankin Bass one, even though I know that it's not the most popular.
Yeah, this is just one of those iconic ones that I feel like plays on like ABC Family very often around the Christmas time. One of those classics that I feel like everyone's parents and grandparents loved. Like I said, I haven't seen it since I was like really little, but I definitely have seen it. It looks so familiar. It's just been a long time, but a little bit unexpected to be honest. I really expected a Christmas horror to be on your first list, to be number one on your list.
Yeah, that was I went back and forth between Santa's Sleigh, Silent Night. I debated Die Hard, but since we're doing like the Christmas list in the spirit of Christmas, this one, I my honorable mentions were the classic tradition nostalgia ones. Then my 5 through 2 were like my favorite ones that I try to watch every year, and this was like the combination of both. So to me, it made the most sense to put it number one. I mean, when we did a Christmas special like show thing in high school, and there's a song in here that's about putting one foot in front of the other in order to like live life, and I even did that for my Christmas like thing that I had to perform. So like I have a lot of ties to this movie. It's solid. It's got a good message.
There you go. Seems like, that's the key to a lot of these good Christmas movies on both of our lists, that they just have an actually good message. So there you go. If there's one thing to take from it, I guess it's that.
Yeah. And with that, we would say Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.